Welcome back. In a moment, we'll continue to discuss the fallout from the US election campaign. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. A giant sinkhole has emerged at the intersection of a street in Tokyo. 5 lanes of the usually busy street were swallowed by the 20-meter pit, which appeared just outside Hakata Station. South Korea, the United States and the UK are conducting air drills until November the 10th. The trilateral exercises are taking place at Asan Air Base in South Korea. And Samsung's headquarters in South Korea have been raided as part of a probe into a political scandal. Prosecutors are looking into whether the company improperly provided financial assistance to a friend of the president. Well, back now to our discussion of the US election campaign and the deep divisions that have emerged in American society. Professor Inderjeet Palmer and Dr. Daniel Cato are with us in the studio. Inderjeet Palmer, what do you think now? Let's deal with the Republican Party, because we had the Tea Party phenomenon. That, in some way, has been almost overtaken or eclipsed by the Donald Trump phenomenon. What next for republicanism, irrespective of who's president?
I think it's very interesting. That's probably one of the most interesting things to be looking at it right now. I think the Republican Party's leadership has been in a real crisis. They haven't really known how to handle Donald Trump. What Donald Trump has shown is that you don't actually have to be a conservative, that is low taxes, small government, a Republican to win the nomination, which is the first time since 1980 that's been recognized. He's left that party leadership behind. If he were to win the presidency, I think the actual game changes, and I think it changes in directions which are probably quite favorable to the Republican Party. In a way, Donald Trump has to collaborate with the leadership in order to get anything done about all the promises he's made. And I suspect that, given that he's also rode back from many of his anti-conservative rhetoric and ideas early on, towards appointing people who are hardcore conservatives to his campaign transition team, like Ed Filner, who's the former president of the Heritage Foundation, I think this could well be a way in which the Republican Party reunifies around a very conservative platform in practice, and actually probably has the most conservative platform Republicans have ever had.
So the Trump campaign, you could see, might be a good thing. Daniel, let me ask you the equivalent question about the Democrat Party. They threw away a socialist in questionable circumstances, as I think Inderjeet referred to earlier on, and they've got a traditional, professional, long-term, centre-left candidate in Hillary Clinton. What do you think are the ramifications for the Democrat Party going forward?
Ironically, I think if the Democrats win the Senate, Bernie Sanders will come out a winner. He will become the chair of the Budget Committee. So between Bernie Sanders, what Elizabeth Warren's doing, what Russ Feingold, who's probably going to win the Senate seat in Wisconsin, there's going to be a push from the Senate left on Hillary. And Hillary at least seems, at this point now, amenable to those pressures. So that'll be interesting to see. I think she will push for comprehensive immigration reform in the first 100 days, partly because I think there's a huge demand. You see that with Hispanic voters, along with it creates further disarray within the Republican Party. And then, when it comes to the foreign policy decisions, that's where it gets a little murky. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough in the campaign to see what she will actually do, partly because Trump himself never gave any real foreign policy specifics about what he's going to do, only criticized what happened in the past. So I think the foreign policy will become a part of her agenda in the first 100 days. Unfortunately, we don't know how. But the left in the Senate will push her, particularly on domestic policy issues like comprehensive immigration reform and minimum wage increases.
A thought for both of you. Does this prove actually the American system needs more power or more opportunity for independence? I mean, the demographics are changing, for instance. Where's a Latino voice? You know, where's an immigrant voice or something like that? Do you think it's maybe in 4 years' time we're going to be a population will be still fed up with this traditional left, traditional right, and there's no other choice?
I think that generally, I would agree with that. But I think even this year's campaign on both sides, both parties, has shown that although people are fed up with both political parties, in the end, Bernie Sanders, who is an independent senator, ran as a Democrat. Trump, who was previously a Democrat, ran as a Republican. That is to say, there is a belief...
You had to join the political club.
You have to have the big brands to be taken seriously.
Do you think that will never change? Or there's no sign of change now?
I think what normally happens, I think, in American politics is not that necessarily a third party emerges, but one of the two main parties swallows
Pivots a bit.
pivots a little bit towards whatever's out there and swallows it up and broadens its coalition somewhat, such that the two parties look the same in terms of what they're called, but actually are very different internally in terms of the coalitions which govern them. So they're likely to be able to probably swallow up quite big chunks of the independent platforms, which is effectively what's happened to Bernie Sanders.
Daniel, do you think the two-party system is intact and has this ability, chameleon-like, to change as it needs to?
I believe so, and I think the two-party system is flexible enough and malleable enough to deal with the changes within America. The question is, I think, at what point, what we learned from Trump, I think, and what we learned from Bernie Sanders is the importance of local politics. That I think for a long time, we put the emphasis on national politics, who's going to win the presidency, when actually the power, we should be looking at who's winning in the state legislatures, who's winning at the local level, and can you act on your promise on the local level. So that's where I think the changes need to be made, not necessarily with the third party.
But Trump didn't prove himself at a local, he didn't prove himself at any level. He proved himself to be a guy who can build a few hotels and golf courses and host a TV show.
But I think he talked to local constituencies. I think his notion of trade, which is a little off from the traditional Republican platform, I think, is what resonated with a lot of his voters. This is not politics as usual. And this is not quite what you would hear from national party leaders, but this is what I think local constituencies wanted to hear.
What do you think the global impression of this has left? The political system in America, a beacon of democracy. Maybe it's not a beacon of democracy anymore. But do you think the brand of American democracy has been damaged over this last 18 months?
Allies around the world of the United States, and America has more allies than any other power, look at the United States to see what kind of leadership is this country offering, both in terms of direct political leadership, but also soft power. That is, how attractive a society is it? How do people want to emulate it or not, or are alienated by it?
And it's been farcical, hasn't it?
This has been damaged. For many people, Americans and others, it's quite an embarrassment what has been going on. But I think what's going on in the domestic level is only a much heightened version of what is going on internationally as well, because the American project has been a global project since the Second World War. What happened with Brexit and the crisis of Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, and how that refugee crisis has ended up in the heart of Europe with terror and refugees and asylum seekers and so on. They're part of the crisis of the American global order as well. So the really dangerous time, actually, I think. But it's also an opportunity. I think it's a very important time where large numbers of things which were taken for granted as never really going badly wrong are going badly wrong at home and abroad. It's a time to actually for some fresh thinking and fresh ideas about how to reorient American power at home and abroad.
Well, that's where we'll leave our conversation for today. Indrajit Palmer and Daniel Cato, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
We end with our Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that when Americans go to the polls to vote for their country's next president, that's all there is to it. In fact, citizens in the US vote on a range of issues when they cast their vote. Ballot measures or propositions operate like referenda, are a form of direct democracy. This election season, Americans will vote on everything from changes to local tax law, the death penalty, even legislation around marijuana. And that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.